All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good morning, everyone. My name is Patty Smirk. I'm with Simplex IT, and this is our monthly project management webinar. Thanks for joining us this morning. Today we're going to talk about task dependencies in Microsoft Project. We'll get started with task dependencies. We might get a little bit into task types. I was thinking about this right before the webinar, but that might be a topic for another webinar because it's one of those things where it can be very simple but very complex. So I may continue on with that next month. But for now, we'll talk about task dependencies in Microsoft Project. If you've never been to one of our webinars, you'll see here that we partner with some great companies, Microsoft, Sophos, Cisco. If you need help in any of those areas, please let us know. Should Simplex IT be your IT department? We sure hope so. So if we can help you out, again, please let us know. We have some great topics coming up for the next few months. In August, if you're local to the Northeast Ohio area, I'd like to invite you to our annual picnic. We're in our new location, so just a few miles south of where we used to be, still on Darrow Road, Route 91. So we'll have our picnic, we'll grill out some good food. We'll have a couple different presentations if you're interested. If you're not, no big deal. We'll talk about Ring Central Office phone systems. We'll talk about Office 365, and then business continuity, I believe. Again, if you want to join us for those, that's great. If not, that's fine too. We'll have good food, games, and just enjoy the nice summer weather. And then the next day, we're back with our next webinar. So our next webinar is on August 11th for Office, and we're going to talk about charts in Microsoft Excel. So that'll be a fun one, especially with the new charts that are available in this new version. Our next PM webinar, we're going to talk about building a project team and why we need a project team and what that means, especially if you're using Project Online. And then, like I said, the next one after that will probably be task types in detail. In September, in September, our PM webinar is Office 365. So maybe we'll do task types in October. Good problem to have when there's so much you want to talk about. So our Office webinar is going to be Skype for Business, and it ain't just video calls. I love this topic because there's so much that you can do with Skype for Business. And a lot of you, if you have Office 365, already have Skype for Business or can add it on for a small monthly fee. So we're going to talk a little bit about Skype for Business. Our PM webinar will be Office 365 Planner again. That was a hot topic that I want to touch on again. And then again, if you're local to the Northeast Ohio area, this one won't be broadcast. It's just a local event. On October 5th, we're having a backup disaster recovery business continuity executive seminar. So it's going to be an executive breakfast held at our office. So if you came to the cybersecurity seminar, it's going to be very similar to that. A little bit, we'll go on for a couple hours, a little bit more detailed, a little bit more information than our typical lunch and learns. And this time we're doing a breakfast, so come on out for coffee and bagels. You can check out our event calendar on our website for all of our events. We keep that pretty up to date. Usually the first thing we do when we add an event is add it to the calendar, and then we throw it out on social media. So if you're interested in following us to see all of our upcoming events, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. We always put our events on social media as well as our blog and our website. I know a lot of you are already familiar with Simplex IT, but we are your virtual CIO handling all of your IT needs. We also have a data branch. Simplex DBA ensures the health, performance, and usefulness of your corporate data. And then Simplex PM, which is probably what you're here for since this is a project management webinar. So I head that up. Again, my name is Patty, and I'm helping project managers at small to mid-sized businesses sort of take on the role of project managers that some of the larger organizations have gotten so good at. So we can use a lot of the same methodologies in the smaller organizations. All right, so without further ado, let's talk a little bit about task dependencies in Microsoft Project. So I took this literally a screenshot from the help system. So this is nothing that you need to commit to memory. But if you want to go back and refer to this graph at a later date, you can find it in Project Help. Just type in task dependencies and this little chart pops up. But I thought it was a great reference for us, especially since we're talking about these dependencies. So basically a task dependency, just to take a step back, is anytime you make one task dependent on another. So a very typical example, we'll use the one here, is dig foundation must be complete before your team can pour concrete. So if you know anything about concrete, you know that you have to dig the basement out before you can pour the concrete, right? So you can link those two tasks together. Now the advantage to using links in project is that they will move according to the changes in your project. So a lot of times we will start creating a project and we just want to type in the dates that we know things are going to happen. And that's fine, but if things don't happen according to those dates, then it gets very hard to move tasks around. And I know a lot of folks have struggled with this, and I'll show you an example here when we move over to projects. So we want to use links as much as possible to keep that dynamic scheduling intact. So the finish to start link is the default, and that's, I would say, the most common. I use that one probably 85 to 90% of the time. So that is strictly a task finishes, the next one can start. Okay, but that second one cannot start until the first one is finished. So our example, dig foundation and then pour concrete, is a great example. I always use the example of you can't proofread a book until you write the book or the chapter or the paper or whatever. So that's another great finish to start. We have to write the paper before we can proofread the paper. Now, in addition to that, in addition to the finish to start, we also have a start to start. And the start to start basically means that they're going to start at the same time. So anytime you think that you can overlap tasks, we want to start by doing that with a link if possible. So in this example, to save time, we want to level concrete at one end of the foundation while it's still being poured on the other end. So we're going to start both of them at the same time. I'm going to start leveling the concrete and pouring the concrete. Just very similar to start, but just the opposite, is the finish to finish. So this means that the second task can't finish until the first task finishes. So they don't have to end at the same time. They can end any time after the first one ends. So it's basically the finish of one determines the finish of another. So in this example on the screen here, your team is adding the wiring to the building and inspecting it at the same time. So until add wiring is done, we can't finish inspect electrical. We can start it, but we can't finish it. Okay. And then the start to finish, I have actually never used this in real life. The example here is a great example. It's the only great example I've ever found. So it may be more useful in construction and building type projects. I've not found a use for it very much in IT projects, but it's the start to finish. So basically it means that the second task can't finish until the first task starts. And the example here is great. So we have roof trusses for a building that we're building. They're being assembled off site. So we can't finish assembling the roof, the second task, we can't finish it until the trusses are delivered. Okay, so that's an example of a start to finish. Like I said, the majority of the time you'll probably use a straight finish to start, and then occasionally a start to start or a finish to finish. So let's hop over to project. Oh, thank you. Somebody just let me know that the audio went out. I apologize for that. Let's take a few minutes to go back, and right now we're in Microsoft Project. Let me know if you can hear me now. I see somebody typing. Thank you. Right now we're in Microsoft Project. I created several tasks, a task list here in Project, and I want to be able to say that I want task B to start when task A is finished. So just a straight finish to start relationship. Okay. So I can do that by selecting both tasks. And there's a number of different ways that you can create the task links. I'll show you a few different ways. So if this first way isn't how you normally do it, that's okay. So one way is I can select both tasks, and I can use my link button in the toolbar up at the top. So I can click on that link button. It looks like a little chain link, and it creates the link for me. And it's always going to default to a finish to start. Okay, so unless you need something else, you're good to go. I can see all my details of these two tasks when I hover over top of the arrow that links them together. And whenever you create a task link, you're basically creating a task relationship between the two tasks. So you're saying that I have a finish to start relationship from task A to task B. I can do the same thing. Let's say that I want task B and C to be linked together. I can select both of those and use my link button up at the top. You'll notice this link looks a little bit longer, and that's just because it's spanning over the weekend. So this project is set up to not work Saturday and Sunday. So it's still a finish to start. It's just going to carry through the weekend and then start on Monday. Now, quick and easy shortcut here is if you just wanted to, I just hit undo several times here. If you wanted to schedule all of these tasks in a finish to start relationship, you can select all of the tasks at once, and then you can click on the link button, and that just creates all of the finish and start relationships for you. Now you can also double click a task to open up the task details. And then you can click on the predecessor tab and set up your task relationship that way. So here you can see that it defaulted to a finish to start because we already set it up in the previous step. But I could change it here if I wanted to any one of the types that we talked about. And if I wanted to remove it, I can just select none. And that would remove that relationship entirely. Notice that it moved it back to the task, it moved it back to start on Tuesday, or I'm sorry, on Thursday, because there's nothing telling project that it should start after the previous task. So project thinks it can start as soon as possible, which is today. Now, a lot of times what we do is we say, oh, well, I want this to start, next Thursday. So I'm just going to change the date here. And I'll change it to next Thursday. And that's fine. You'll get a planning wizard that pops up, and it actually tells you, hey, you're entering a start date. Do you want to link them so it always follows the previous task, or do you just want to move it without adding the link? So if you do it without adding the link, I'm going to click OK on without adding the link, it'll move it. But now, if for some reason, if a previous task takes it a little bit longer, let's say that this takes 10 days, all of your other tasks are moved to accommodate that task taking a little bit longer, but the one that you manually scheduled by typing in a start date is left there. Okay. So this is a case where you really have to just determine whether or not the task is dependent on another task or if it's dependent on a specific date. If it's a specific date, then yes, absolutely type in the start date of the date that task is going to start. Maybe it's dependent on you hiring a contractor and they can't start until a certain day. Or whatever. If it's very date specific, then yes, by all means enter in a start date. If it's truly dependent on the task before it, then you'll want to link it, because if that task moves or changes throughout the project, then everything else will reschedule. And sometimes that'll drive you a little batty trying to figure out where your tasks went. People will often ask me, I made one change and now my tasks, I can't find them. And that does happen. If it's something that you're fighting with, then I'll always recommend really thinking about if it's task specific or date specific, and then following it from there, whether you create a task dependency or enter in the start date. The reason why the start date is so restrictive is because when you enter a start date, project assumes that you want a task constraint. And a task constraint is just a way of forcing project to schedule something at a specific time. If you only use task relationships to schedule tasks, then it's going to be, your schedule is going to be very fluid as your tasks change. And that's the beauty of projects, so that you don't have to change every single task when one task takes longer or shorter amount of time. However, when you enter a task constraint, project will do everything it can to meet that constraint. So just typing in the start date here, you are setting up a constraint. Project does that for you automatically. And I just double clicked on this task and I went into the advanced tab. And here I can see that I have a constraint type of start no earlier than. So that was done for me. And sometimes people don't realize that it does create this constraint. So it's going to start at no earlier than the 28th, because I said I wanted to start it on the 28th. Now you have, if you need something scheduled on a specific day, I don't want to make it sound like you can't ever use constraints, because sometimes they're needed. It's just very constrictive if you use it for every single task on your project, or when they're not needed. And then oftentimes you can get away with using constraints that aren't quite as restrictive. So you'll notice that there are two up at the top: as late as possible and as soon as possible. And so those are constraints, but they're not hard constraints. So starting a task as soon as possible is basically a finish to start relationship, or as late as possible. And then you have the ones that are sort of middle of the road, the finish no earlier than and start no earlier than. So these are like, they're kind of restrictive. They should finish, no earlier than a certain date, or finish no later than a certain date. And then the last four, or I'm sorry, the next two are probably the most restrictive. So it must finish on a certain date, or it must start on a certain date. And then you have your start no earlier than, your finish no earlier than. So so if you're going to use constraints, see if you can do the as late as possible or as soon as possible. The finish no earlier than, no later than, and the start no earlier than, no later than are sort of your middle of the road, kind of constrictive, but not as much as the must finish on and must start on. So your must start on, if you have a specific date in mind, not a deadline, but maybe you have maybe you have an inspector coming out, and he is coming out at a certain day, whether you're ready or not. So you can schedule, it must finish on, or must start on that date that he's coming out, and he's just going to inspect whatever you have, done at that specific date. Or a meeting. If you have meetings that you want to put in your project schedule, this is another conversation that I have with a lot of other PMs, because some folks will want to schedule meetings in their projects, and then other folks will say no, they just want their project schedules to be for tasks. So it's up to you. There's no right or wrong way. I tend to leave my project schedule just for tasks, but then you have to be cognizant of the fact that you're not including all of the hours or time spent on a project if you exclude the meetings. So again, just there's no right or wrong way, as long as you're aware of both, the impact of both. But meetings are a good one that, must start on a certain date that you would use. So I can say must start on, and then it has to start on the 28th. So now if I try to link these two tasks together, I'm going to get a planning wizard warning. So it's saying, you're causing a scheduling conflict. And these can be very frustrating. And I know that they're frustrating because they've frustrated me. The only advice I can give you is to read through them carefully, because usually they are helpful. So it's saying this action will cause a scheduling conflict. Task 5 of Project 1 has a task constraint or is linked to a task that cannot move. And as a result, the constraint or the link cannot be set. So I'm basically saying, okay, task F, you have to start on the 28th, but I'm also saying that I want to link it to task E, and that finishes on the 9th, August 9th. So that it doesn't make sense. So I have two options. I can cancel and avoid the scheduling conflict, or I can continue. And if I say continue, it creates the link, but it leaves the task, back at the 28th. Let me undo that. There is another way. There's got to be a better way. There is another way to do that. Let's say that, let me remove this constraint entirely. And to remove a constraint, there's really not a great way to delete it. I remove constraints just by changing the constraint type to as soon as possible and removing the constraint date. So to get rid of a constraint, change the constraint type to as soon as possible, remove the date, click OK, and you'll notice in your indicator column that that constraint is gone. Okay. So let's say that I want to link task E and F together. And let's pretend that task E is, I don't know, plant grass. And task F is cut grass. So I need to wait several weeks after I plant the grass to cut it. Okay. So instead of just doing a straight finish to start, I want to do a finish to start with some time in between. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead, there's a couple different ways to do this. I can either double click on the predecessor task, the successor task, the second one, and then go to the predecessor tab. And I can add some lag time in here. So I may want to add, I don't know, 3 weeks. 3 weeks after I plant grass that I can cut the grass. So I'm going to enter in 3 weeks and click OK. And you'll notice that puts out cut grass 3 weeks out. Now some people will say, well, that's great, but why don't you just make plant grass last for 3 weeks? And I could do that. That will still push out the dates. That handles my date problem. But the only thing to be careful is if you're using project for budgeting or hours, then you'll want to be careful and you'll want to make your durations actually true to the task, not necessarily true to the time. So it might only take me a day to plant the grass. And if I've got resources that have hourly rates assigned to them, if I make that task 3 weeks, it's going to throw my budget off because it doesn't take me 3 weeks to plant the grass, it takes me a day. So I will usually make that duration true to the actual task, and then I'll add what's called lag time. And lag time is just any time you're waiting. And again, I got there by double clicking on the successor task and going to the predecessor tab. Or you can double click on the line that links the two tasks. And notice if I hover over top of it, you can see the lag time is 3 weeks there. I can double click on it and I can change it here as well. Let's say it's a hot, dry spring like we had and we need an extra week. I can change it there as well. And you'll notice in your predecessor tab that you have an additional 4 weeks. So you'll see your predecessor finish to start plus 4 weeks of lag time. And then one more thing I want to show you before we wrap up. Let's say that we have 2 tasks that can overlap. So let's say that they're both 5-day tasks and we want to overlap them by 3 days, let's say. So I'm still going to link them together, that's fine, but I want them to overlap. So instead of extending the second task out, instead of waiting, we want it to happen sooner. So it's found in the same exact place. So I'm just going to double click on the line that links the 2 tasks together, and it's actually called lead time. And just think of it as the opposite of lag time. So lag time pushes it out, pushes it to the right, delays the task. Lead time makes it happen sooner, moves it to the left. So we actually enter lead time in the lag time field with negative numbers. So I'm just going to say I want to give a 2-day head start, so I want lag time of -3 days. So I'm entering -3 in the lag time field, and you'll notice that it starts task E for a couple of days, and then task F comes in and starts a few days into it. So whenever you have an overlap situation, you can enter that in the lag time field. Again, just double clicking on the predecessor. I'm sorry, double clicking on the successor, and then going to the predecessor tab. And you can change it here as well. If I want to give a 3-day head start, I would do 2 days of lag. So I'm just saying I want this task F to happen 2 days sooner. All right, I know that that was a lot to take in with the project, I'm sorry, with the task relationships. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, my name is Patty, Simplex IT. Feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call if you have any questions about Microsoft Project Online, project management in general. I love to talk about this stuff. So let me know. And then, like I said, keep an eye out. I'm going to do another project webinar on the different task types, the fixed duration, fixed units, fixed work, and what all of that means. And that'll be a good one because I know that that's a frustrating topic for a lot of folks. So, all right, thanks everyone and have a great day.